We're going to start this session off. I'm going to ask a few questions. It's going to be a relatively quick-fire session, but we're going to start off with Alan Littler, who's a gaming lawyer at Kalff, Katz and Franssen, who's going to give us a brief update on where we are right now.
Okay, I think it'll be quite a brief update. So we're talking about this changes to the land-based monopoly on sports betting, rather. I think any changes in this regard are going to require an act of Parliament. So the land-based monopoly is enshrined in the 1964 legislation, and as we've seen, it's taken an awful long time to bring about changes to introduce any form of remote gambling. So I think to change what's been established since 1964 will also take a long time. But that said, is there any appetite to do so? Maybe not right at this moment. I think it would be for a future government to pick the matter up. But back in 2011, I was looking back at some of the things which were said as and when the remote gambling reforms were starting to bubble up and to take shape. And there was a letter published by the State Secretary for Justice back in March 2011, a so-called policy vision, which touched upon different aspects of the gambling market, gambling regulation, different fields, different monopolies. And back in 2011, he at the time said that they would consider looking at whether there is some scope for market forces in the land-based markets, including sports betting. And at that time, they also asked themselves whether there would be any possibility for the privatization of the state lottery, the Staatslotterij. And I think it was back in 2016, the Staatslotterij merged with or took over the Lotto, which is the entity which has the sports betting monopoly. And then 3 years later, in July 2014, there was another letter sent by the same State Secretary in which he looked at which was entitled The Modernization of Gambling, or the gambling regulation, I should say. And one of the various points which was mentioned in that letter was that they would use the time from July 2014 until sometime in 2017 to look at the licensing system for lotteries, including the charity lottery sector, which has already been subject to change through case law rather than government policy. And this would also include consideration of the license award system for other lottery licenses as well. But to date, this has not happened. We've seen how long it has taken for the changes to the remote gambling aspect to take place. And we also saw that the Holland Casino Bill, well, it was introduced in 2016. And in February, the Senate, the upper house, said, well, let's not do this at the same time as introducing remote gambling. So that has been pushed to one side, that's been kicked into the grass. I suppose before another government perhaps to pick up in the future. So if Holland Casino the privatization of Holland Casino has just been put to one side, then I think the reform of the lottery sector will probably be even further in the future. So it's a very simple update, or perhaps it's not an update, it's just a review of the status quo.
Thank you, Alan. So we're also joined by Sanne here, who's from who's General Secretary at Kansspelen.
Yes.
I can't pronounce your surname, so I'm just going to not do that.
Muijser.
Thank you very much for joining us, both of you. And this is going to be a relative, as I say, quick fire sort of Q&A session. For someone who lived in London for years, who lived in the UK for years, the idea that retail sports betting is still not being addressed in the Netherlands, and the monopoly situation hasn't been challenged. And the fact that online betting is being legalised doesn't quite compute. Like from someone coming from a place where bookies are on every corner, on every high street. Why is it, and how has it taken so long, or will take so long in the Netherlands to address it?
Well, that has everything to do with the idea of the government when they did write COA, that there must be a distinction between the online offering and the land-based offering, and especially a distinction in taxation. So first of all, there was a 29% taxation of the land-based offering and 20% online. In 2016, Parliament agreed that it will be all together, so and online and land-based offering will be taxed by 29%. But by this distinction, the government also decided that it was not allowed for land-based operators to put terminals or other devices within their arcades or our pubs. And it's quite a schizophrenic situation, because if I go to an arcade now and I can take out my mobile phone and I can play some sports betting, and on the other hand, you can't play there on a terminal which is properly taken care of, and there are all the prevention measurements are in place. So,
and what position are you and your members taking?
Well,
given that that's the status quo.
It's still in the rules in the legislation now of COA. So we have to discuss this with the government. How will this work out? And don't you think it's also a schizophrenic situation? So we have to wait on that answer.
You mentioned earlier, if I can talk about what your strategy might be to approach that, and in relation to the language of COA. Can you talk a bit about that and how you sort of see the leverage that you might have in that situation?
Well, I think the most important thing is that, and we all know that the authority, the KSA, did mention in their annual report that the growth of illegal sports betting in land-based surroundings is, well, speeding up. We talk about illegal terminals, kind forms of cash centers, something like that, and they have great difficulties to cope with that. So when the government will decide to also make it possible for us to have terminals in a well-protected environment, we think that illegal offering will go away, and so we have to also have the player protection in place and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, bringing the same benefits as regulations
exactly
online.
Exactly.
Yeah. Alan, what could be some of the main obstacles associated with challenging this monopoly of NLO in this space?
Well, I think I'll go back to your earlier question to Sanne.
Yeah.
There have been challenges to the current status quo, but they all took place, I suppose they were initiated more than a decade ago now. But there was a challenge to the lack of a transparent license allocation process for the license for sports betting, and also for the horse race betting license. That then resulted in the Betfair Sporting Exchange reference to the court in Luxembourg. And there was also a challenge to the monopoly status, or the monopoly as such, in the Landbased litigation, and that then came back, and it was decided that the monopoly was compliant. I suppose one could ask that question. One could ask the question: would the same reasoning, would the same result be found now? I mean, I think the facts on which the Council of State came to its conclusion were already outdated by the time it reached its decision. So perhaps if the situation was reviewed now, a different consideration, a different outcome could be obtained. But yeah, that's a different question to the one you just asked me. Yeah, what would the main challenges be? I think one of the big obstacles, perhaps apart from potential apathy amongst parliamentarians, would be the very tight relationship between sport in the Netherlands and De Lotto, and the fact that De Lotto has been contributing money to, I think, the KNVB and the Dutch Olympic Committee for many decades now. So if there's going to be a change, and people, of course, are going to be concerned about whether that represents a threat to the current funding models. So I think something would have to be arranged in one form or another, which would then take those concerns away. But I could imagine that would be a very sticking point.
Do you think that there'll be a sort of a slow shift, perhaps in perception, whether that's in the legislature or in public perception, when you have gaming brands who are online with sports betting products across the country, yet they can't have any of that product in their retail or their land-based operations? Just the fact that they're going to have these effectively sports betting brands or products online, do you think there's just going to be a slow shift that people start to realise actually these are very, very close verticals, and the cross-sell between them presents a massive opportunity and therefore a tax take for the government, Just the fact that when online goes live, that might start to shift things?
Yeah, I suppose now the land-based sector is all contained within the individual monopolies. And as we heard this morning, Holland Casino isn't going to stick to casino gambling when it goes online. So if it offers sports betting online, what it can't offer is offline, that may then generate, as well as your members doing the same, that may generate questions as to why, in the online, in the remote sphere, the markets, the verticals are all mixed, and in the offline, everybody sticks to the old-fashioned, if you like, product verticals and the divisions between them. So that could then be a push for discussion.
Yeah. Do you agree with that? The shifting landscape will ultimately lead to...
But still, I think it's a schizophrenic situation, so, yeah, that's... Yeah.
What would be your ideal outcome then? What would be, in terms of an operating environment, and taxes, obviously, you're going to say as low as possible, but,
I can talk for my members, but I think that what I already said is that to bring players to a well-protected environment will benefit the players, but also my members. They will give them business opportunities. They can create accessible entertainment zones, or they can compromise with their multi-branding opportunities. So yeah, that will give them the big opportunities. But first of all, I think the most important thing is to give the player who now is playing illegally a protected environment.
Within a land-based operation.
Exactly, yeah.
How big do you think that opportunity is for your members if you think about the size of the sports betting market that will exist online, that already exists with the lottery?
I can't compare it with the online sports betting market, but I know that the illegal market is fastly growing. And I hope that we can take away maybe 90% of the illegal market in the pubs. So, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, a couple more questions. Just before I do these last couple, anyone got any questions from the audience? Yeah, down the front. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Harry Linners. I'm independent. What, according to you guys, is going to happen to the, let's say, 3,500 sports betting retail shops, like the little cigar shops, and the bigger retailers like Albert Heijn, that carry the lotteries, but also sports betting? What do you reckon is going to happen to the sports betting?
Well, I think it's still, until the monopoly is not broken down, it still will be there, and that's the only... Yeah.
I mean, after Jan 1, 2021, obviously, when the market is open,
yeah.
I mean, you do know that the Dutch lottery has to pay an additional percentage to the retailers to carry sports betting over and above additional costs. So what do you think is going to happen then?
Well, I suppose everybody has additional costs of one type or another, but I guess it's also whether there will be any, whether the land-based players who really do want to play in the Albert Heijn or in the newsagents, whether they will be interested in the online offer. And if they're loyal to the Toto, they can already participate via an app or a website. So in that sense, maybe the challenge is already there. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a fair question, though. Does it start eradicating? You saying that the online offerings will start eradicating that?
Well, I have an opinion, that's why I asked their opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. You're the neutral independent, yeah. Can we just think about any lessons that we've learned or models that you think the Netherlands should follow when it comes to bringing a land-based sports betting market to life?
Well, I can only speak for myself. In last October, I saw in Romania, in Bucharest, a very, very, very nice arcade with an entertainment zone and with a lively pub with it. And well, it was almost a dream for the Netherlands, and there was sports betting. So I think that is something where we have to think about. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, we've seen in places like New Jersey. I was there earlier this year, and the size and scale of the sports books that have been launched at the racetracks in New Jersey and of course in the casinos as well is enormous. The amount of people that are there is
social cohesion
is
and
and it becomes becomes a destination in its own right.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Alan?
I can't imagine that taking place here. I mean, we've seen in the discussion around Holland Casino, we don't want Vegas on the mass, we don't want any large Holland Casino or other venues of other operators post-privatization, which is now off the table. But so I can't imagine that there would be a model like in the UK where there are bookmakers on every street corner, as you were saying before. But perhaps there could be a bit more presence in the venues where they are currently permitted or currently sold. I suppose that depends on whether there's the appetite. And if you regulate or if you open the online market and then you go back and try and liberalize the offline market, is that perhaps not the best? Is that the wrong way around? But I think we've passed that stage now, so it's too late for that discussion.
Okay. Final question, just to wrap up this this sort of brief update for you. When would be the best time to discuss this for the market? We've just gone through a lot of changes, which a lot of people have waited a long time for. When is this likely to happen? Or if you can make any kind of time frame?
Want to come back in 10 years? I don't know.
No, I hope for my members within the coming 2, 3, 4 years, but I'm not sure of that. Yeah.
10 years?
Yeah, I suppose we've got to go through remote gambling first, and then the question of Holland Casino will probably come back to the top of the list, and then maybe the lottery sector, including sports betting, so quite a while.
Any other questions on this topic before we move on? Okay, all good? Thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Alan.